Ooh, it's Soundgarden and the good stuff too, not this. Alright, low blow, soundgarden. They should have called it quits in 96, but we'll get to that after the end card. Oh, little snack treat for you in a bit, but how about this intro? How about these 90s Schumacher visuals? Official video realism. But seriously people, how about this game? Sick of me asking questions? Me too, so let's do it. 1994 Monkey Do Productions.
Only the poor monkey's important. Everything has to be done for the monkey.
Shall I stop monkeying around? Amazing comedy content, a wordplay genius, a brilliant road rash. When the 3DO launched, it was constantly being showcased on the sidewalk outside of the local Radio Shack where I lived. Anyone else ever see this? They'd roll out an armor-clad CRT on an elementary school AV club dolly in front of the store for passerbys to play. Naturally, we were all drawn to the machine. The visuals were insane, but that asking price was woof up here in Canada, so no one I knew actually owned the damn thing. Still, we'd set ourselves up in front of it to play this and Road and Track presents The Need for Speed.
You got the nerve to push the envelope, man. Got some skill, that's what it takes.
Remember this condescending dude, bro? Why was this a thing?
Okay, alright, so you've done this before. Wow, what do you want, a hero biscuit? Why don't you sit your sticky butt back down behind the wheel and let's see you go even faster, Melvin.
Fast forward a couple of years and our household was the first to get a brand spanking new PlayStation, the tall cases. This was at the rental shop and I was sold, but everyone knows it's a bit smoother on the 3DO, so let's bin the Sony nostalgia. Damn dude, this and The Need for Speed. What's the term everyone uses these days without hesitation? Oh, wow, right, bangers.
They're amazing!
Rusty Cage is the perfect piece of music for this intro. The way a chain smashes through the windshield when Cornell screams break. Yeah, it still gets me. There's a handful of other bands on here, none of them bad, but Soundgarden are heavily featured during the cutscenes, and for that, I'm thankful. Therapy? With a question mark? They're okay. Hammerbox, Swerve Driver, fine. Paw, good in a pinch. Monster Magnet certainly has a fan base. As a dude who enjoys stoner bands like Caius, Electric Wizard, and Clutch, it has always bewildered me to see them placed within the same genre. In my opinion, they've always been a bit more butt rock party pop, but that's just my take. I've tried getting into their early stuff, but it just doesn't land. I do remember becoming steadily more annoyed one summer when I'd take the car out for a spin, only to hear Space Lord on every radio station. Remember terrestrial radio? Yeah. Whose idea was it to make this a single with all the fuck swears? Space Lord, mother. Grating. It was as inescapable as this album cover was awful in 98. Space Lord, mother. Look at these dudes doing Poser a decade before Foo Fighters did Dad Rock Arena tours. Bad over bland any day. Are you seeing this greasy image? Ugh, I need a tetanus shot just looking at it. Space Lord, mother. The late 90s were the worst when it came to popular rock and metal music, my friends. The glistening sheen could repel anyone. Here in Road Rash, we've got two tunes from Bad Motorfinger, the aforementioned Rusty Cage paired with Outshined. Definitely the most appropriate for a wide market. The title track from Super Unknown is also featured along with Kickstand. It doesn't get much more fitting than that because, well, you know, bikes. Yes, we're still talking about Road Rash. Amazing licensed music to accompany the racing, you may be thinking. Nope. Jesus, is there any music at all? Why is the engine noise so loud? Oh, and you can't adjust the bike sound, so it's all or nothing. A-OK. Silence is A-OK, my friend. Why is it so loud? I guess it's best to drown out the music if the license stuff takes up too much disk space during a race. Unless you're playing the Sega CD version, which was developed simultaneously with this one. Gotta make sure I say that. Did you hear me say that? But, you know, unfortunately, this isn't the same game. The menus are similar, but this is more like a beefed up version of the earlier titles. We ranked and reviewed the 16-bit Sega trilogy in the previous video. I recommend checking it out because this new AI version of YouTube certainly isn't going to suggest it. Chronologically, this 3DO version dropped in between the second and third Mega Drive Genesis entries. Oddly, it plays like a beefed up reimagining of the first title with races taking place exclusively in and around California. We've got a newly introduced inner city San Francisco level, the Peninsula, Sierra Nevada, Napa Valley, and my personal favorite course, the truly gorgeous Pacific Coast Highway. Similar to that classic original, there's a heavier emphasis on traditional racing with fewer bells and whistles. Combat exists, but there aren't as many weapons as Road Rash 3, and you can't hold onto gear between rounds. A chain and a club are the armaments that can be stripped from opponents, tapping the action button punches, and doing so while pressing down on the D-pad kicks. The combat is on par with that from the second EA entry. Nowhere near as chaotic as the third, I find this to be the perfect balance between racing and fighting. It's also pretty damn cool how computer-controlled rivals battle it out amongst themselves, something rarely if ever seen in the previous two. There's a sense of realism here with how opponents speed ahead on the open stretches, bail in a natural way, catch up, and fall back. It's a nice ebb and flow, a great rhythm. When it comes to presentation, Road Rash on the 3DO is gorgeous, but the cinematics are very much a product of the era. Dated dude bro 90s dude with a heaping hand of gross out humor, options, perks, and features are hidden behind fairly confusing headers, making it a bit tricky to navigate the menus. They are nowhere near as cryptic as those from the first Need for Speed 3DO game, but not exactly user-friendly for first-time participants. Choose between an arcade-style thrash mode for a bit of practice or the fully featured alternative, where it's necessary to place in the top 3 across 5 different courses. Completing these will advance the level. Cash payouts are rewarded after each race to put towards a new ride or pay off fines. The 3 bike categories are the same as those in the older games: Rat, Sport, and Super, with the latter containing the crotch rockets enhanced with Nitro. Those expecting a more advanced upgrade system will probably be disappointed. The ability to purchase and swap out parts wouldn't be introduced until the following year on the Mega Drive Genesis, but it always felt like a superfluous addition, as you can only go so far with the tweaking. The only thing missing from all of these early games is a comprehensive screen with bike stats to compare in real time. Basically, if you're consistently trailing behind, it means you need a better machine. Progression is simply locked behind the cost of a new ride. In other words, if you can't afford the best bike by the 5th and final level, you're doing something wrong. It's fairly rote, but as someone who prefers the arcade simplicity of the original Road Rash, this is definitely a positive for me. I'm not one to enjoy fiddle fucking around in menus all day. Now that being said, if you prefer a robust set of options, this might not be your cup of tea. Bare bones is how I describe this entire game. In general, Road Rash on the 3DO is basic. Think Sonic CD. It's not quite Sonic 2. What it lacks in features, it makes up for in gameplay. Sadly, this version lacks a multiplayer option, but hey, if you played the first entry on the Mega Drive Genesis and opted to take turns instead of swapping between 2 players in between courses, it's not really a setback. Sure, it sucks to not be able to compete head-to-head with a friend in split-screen mode, but we rarely played the second like that anyway due to how choppy it all was. For us, it was more entertaining to pass the controller around, taking turns to advance quicker, finishing the game in one sitting. When we finally got the port of this one home on the PlayStation, I remember being slightly disappointed by this omission when I'd have friends over, but again, we made do. Making up for these limitations, we have some of the silkiest, smoothest gameplay. This thing is a 3-dimensional beast with beautiful, realistic backgrounds, incredibly tight controls, and an unmatched sense of speed for the time. The density of the traffic in the city stretches makes for some truly exciting gameplay, and the way roads go from wide, spacious highways to congested single lanes makes for some high-octane races, chock full of variety. Branching forks can either help or hinder your placement. More often than not, the easier, spacious route is the longer of the two, leaving the shorter to be the quicker, with narrower paths and more traffic. It's a good trade-off that sometimes results in some off-road shenanigans through wine country, complete with grape-picking pedestrian parasites. Napa Valley, here I come. For the first time in the series, there are a handful of charming individuals to play as. Wonderful, yep, trash talk is still here, as are the cutscenes. What's the implication here? I feel like visiting the free clinic just watching these. Effort was clearly put into these, definitely a time capsule.
Syphilis.
Anyone have some penicillin? It could be worse.
Okay, here's the deal. You can fly it solo, Race against the clock, we're gonna have some real fun, and you can take me on.
Syphilis.
Even if you're the type of edgelord to enjoy these snippets, there are only several, so they tend to get repetitive after a while, especially the very few videos that play before races. Fortunately, all of these cutscenes are skippable. At the starting line, the engine sounds blow out the old eardrums, and Don Vega's original score gets drowned out while racing, which is unfortunate because some of his pieces are decent this time around. That bass slap, those drums, they're pretty good. The guitar is thin, a bit high on the treble. It's hard to complain too much because it's barely audible. The sound effects are great, especially the muffled echoes when tunnels are entered. Punching and kicking is satisfyingly crunchy. The heavy attack was first introduced here. Holding up in conjunction with action pulls it off. Hearing the screeching wails of pedestrians as my bike uses their bodies as makeshift ramps, it's all very satisfying. Each course expands in length with every level. These are some of the slickest looking makeshift tracks in any racing game from the era. The Need for Speed is arguably the visual standout, but Road Rash is impressive as it also has to account for the combat. Textures are crispy clean. Yeah, we're stuck in California, and sure, we're basically seeing a lot of highways surrounded by fields when we're not riding through cities, but there are enough detailed flourishes to keep things feeling varied. The backgrounds are vivid, the draw distance is as impressive as the scaling. At top speed, everything flows together well. Hazards feel naturally placed, rivals are balanced, and there are tons of slippery oil or water puddles to keep an eye out for. Even with the limited amount of combat, riding around never gets boring. The tidy, immersive HUD has been replaced by some cheap-looking meters and basic writing in that old-school PC font style. An input brings up the speedometer, but it takes up a lot of screen real estate and doesn't depict all of the information, making it tough to see opponents encroaching from behind. The rear-view mirrors are missing entirely, which is a huge bummer. The only sign of incoming bikers is their name flashing at the bottom or the effective sound of them approaching from behind if you've got the game hooked up to a good set of speakers or headphones. Cops are more aggressive than ever. There are a scant few in the earlier stages, but by the 4th level they increase in numbers. It's nice to be able to beat on them, or lure their bikes into oncoming traffic. Construction workers, blockades, the courses keep evolving as the player progresses. All of these obstacles are manageable due to the finely tuned controls. Sometimes the Road Rash series had a problem remaining balanced in the higher rounds. In the second Mega Drive Genesis entry, for example, it was often too challenging to remain on the road and atop the vehicle in the 5th set of 5. Here, it's all balanced. Nothing feels artificially difficult, again, much like the first 16-bit entry. Failing doesn't necessarily mean the race has been lost, as the computer-controlled characters make their fair share of mistakes as well. If you're not going super fast, you won't go ass over tea kettle like you did in the past. The physics have been improved. On the flip side, wrecking your bike now comes at a higher penalty. Instead of an inexpensive fine, totaling a ride sets the player back a bit, which is great. It's tough to do, so the punishment feels fair. There's not a whole lot more to say other than that this remains my favorite Road Rash game to this day. I'd love to see this series make a comeback. Other companies have attempted to replicate this franchise, but none have quite got there. Some get close, but ultimately nothing feels like this. It's the best of its kind. Sometimes I find it challenging to talk about a game I truly love. This is my 3rd or 4th script, and it still feels a bit scattered. Hopefully I did this masterpiece justice. When it comes to the 3DO, this and the Need for Speed are essential. During my research, I stumbled across some goofball article header claiming that Road Rash on this kit is an underrated gem. Is it? Can we retire those terms? Underrated? Seriously, the scores for this game were through the roof at the time, and it was showcased all over the place to sell the Panasonic machine. Hidden gem? Hardly. Do we really need to regurgitate repetitive lines delivered by metal posers on the internet? This and the Need for Speed are the titles to invest in if you own a working 3DO. Next time on this channel, it's the scary spooky season, so stay tuned. All 7 Soundgarden albums rank and reviewed. Yes, 7 because we're counting 2 EPs packaged as one. Alone, isolated, far behind the pack, we've got King Animal, ironically, more of a popper. This reunion record released 16 years after Down on the Upside and 14 years after the band's decision to officially call it quits in 1998. Maturity, age, time, similar terms to describe the same thing, opening with Been Away Too Long, the far too on-the-nose title introducing this straightforward rock album. I said it earlier, bad over bland, at least a rotten record evokes something. There's nothing awful about these 13 tracks, they simply lack the intensity, heart, and adventurous spirit of their earlier work. Soundgarden's music was always a step above their contemporaries. Compelling time changes, offbeat percussion, screeching, animalistic vocals. Similar to their past efforts, each band member contributes to the songwriting here, but nothing has teeth. I've tried, but it's just not for me. Props to them for not phoning it in, but nothing stands out. Cameron's drums are as articulately punchy as ever, a return to form after decades performing for the increasingly dull Pearl Jam. Kim Thile barely sounds like himself with a preference for decent, albeit repetitive guitar riffs. Ben Shepherd's whimsical writing and strong bass playing doesn't really shine through, and Cornell's vocals, while good, are too loud in the mix, which would normally be okay. It was sort of the way for decades across many different projects. Now, how do I say this respectfully? His vocals simply weren't what they used to be. It's a common thing for singers who belt things without much care early in their careers to have to suffer the consequences. I'd argue that he's one of, if not the best to do it, but yeah, it's unsustainable. This collection of songs makes me sad because I want to appreciate the lyrics and artistry, but I can't help but compare the vocals to early Soundgarden. His solo work was still good, mostly because he limited himself to a lower range and didn't have to perform older material live. They should have left on a high note with Down on the Upside. Like a lot of messy film sequels, I simply try to pretend this misstep doesn't exist. Other bands did it better after a long hiatus. Carcass, Faith No More, hell, even that Black Sabbath record wasn't too bad. King Animal is far too repetitive, simplistic, and boring. Back in the early 90s, we'd have to go out of our way to hunt down music. A fan of the band as far back as Ultra Mega OK, it was rather difficult to find anything they released before their mega hit Bad Motorfinger. So there I was, at an out-of-town flea market one dewy Sunday morn when I discovered this, a Soundgarden album I had never heard of. Judging by the cover, I thought it to be a knockoff rip of early live material, but I couldn't risk missing out on anything by this incredible band, so I dumped all of my money on it. $40. Yeah, Yikes, right? Well, let's just say I wasn't disappointed, as these were studio tracks, official songs. The only problem was that I had to wait hours to get it home to my CD player. Louder Than Love was the last to feature Hiro Yamamoto on bass, and the record that carved that new, gentler Soundgarden song structure. Less punk, more Sabbath, with longer pieces that frankly overstay their welcome by a minute or two. It opens with Ugly Truth and Hands All Over, a pair of catchy, riff-heavy tunes that become repetitive after a few minutes. Gun follows with its return to a more haunting, cynical, aggressive nature, something that was prevalent on their earlier albums, easily one of their best compositions. It slowly builds as a doomy dirge until it opens up into complete and utter chaos. Other highlights are the silly, sex-driven snarls of Full On Kevin's Mom, the slow, somber, excellently paced Loud Love, and the super fun I Awake. Big Dumb Sex is another pervy little highlight to bring things home before a reprisal of Full On. Louder Than Love is a big album. It introduced us to the band we recognize today, the hard rock Soundgarden that could straddle intricate musicianship with catchy, memorable radio hits. A must-have. Yeah, oh, whoops, oops. Yeah, I know, this is the one for most, but remember, I was there at the beginning, so hear me out, because I think my opinions have some weight. Bad Motorfinger was Soundgarden's breakthrough album, and for good reason. Rusty Cage outshined Jesus Christ Pose, all singles on the A-side. A monumental opening. The two featured here in Road Rash are among the best rock songs ever created, but to me, this is Louder Than Love Part 2. By this point, Ben Shepherd had replaced Yamamoto on bass, and it's for the better, as he would go on to write some of my favorite pieces. Face Pollution and Somewhere were his creations here, and they lend some much needed variety to the record as a whole. It's his work with Cornell on the incredibly dark Slaves and Bulldozers that stands out the most for me. This is one of my favorite Soundgarden songs. The vocal delivery and lyrics just don't get much better than this. Searching with My Good Eye Closed was what they opened with the first time I saw them live, and I couldn't have been more thrilled. It's a powerful, lengthy number that transitions well while remaining steadily in a moody tempo. Cameron comes through with the extremely interesting, oddly out of step Drawing Flies. When Pearl Jam started to go through the motions, releasing album after album of boring drivel, you could always count on this guy to write a few offbeat numbers. Can any of you drummers out there reliably play Jesus Christ Pose? One of the ballsiest, heaviest collaborations of all band members that exists. I just prefer a few other albums. This is an A+, a classic for a reason. This is where you should start if you've only heard their singles. Accessible, varied, and well executed for its 1 hour duration. Their first masterpiece. Similar to Louder Than Love, this was one I stumbled upon out in the wild and paid a pretty penny for. Ultra Mega OK is Soundgarden's 1988 debut, and it's an incredibly unique effort. Kim Thayil is more present in the songwriting, and it certainly shows. His appreciation for raw punk really shines through. Bad Brains, Black Flag, MC5, quicker tunes, the aggression. Flower opens this thing up delicately with barely distorted guitar strums before it gets into a chunky mid-paced drive. All Your Lies follows with Cornell singing in a higher pitch, an energetic burst before the album stops dead in its tracks with Yamamoto's 665, the first of 2 ambient instrumentals sandwiching the best tune on Ultra Mega OK, Beyond the Wheel. Similar to the aforementioned Gun, this thing builds with chunky instruments and a low vocal delivery before it drops into proper metal madness. It's reminiscent of early Sabbath, with a bit of St. Vitus guitar tone for good measure. An unsettling onslaught of doom riffs and heavy-hitting drums accompany Cornell's possessed singing. The remaining songs are all quick and catchy until Thayil's lengthy penultimate incessant mace. Now, it was around this time that I'd become introduced with the gravelly singing of Howlin' Wolf. As much as I'm not a fan of covers, I was pleased as punch to hear Soundgarden's version of his Smokestack Lightning here on Ultra Mega OK, partly because I thought I was alone at the time in my appreciation for Wolf's stripped back bluesy numbers.
You don't love me.
It felt nice to be validated by one of my favorite bands. Screaming Life and FOPP FOP were two EPs released in 1987 and 88 respectively. They were later compiled in 1990 for distribution. Here, most of the music was written by Thyle, with Cornell handling the lyrics. The reason this sits higher in the ranking is due to the sheer rawness of the music. Tears to Forget exhibits the lead singer at his wildest. No one has ever sounded this ferociously coherent. Sure, there are bands who can achieve a loud, noisy sound, but normally it comes out as complete and utter chaos. There's a giant space in my heart and record collection for that too, but Soundgarden managed to successfully amalgamate that energy with organized, harmonious song structures. Entering is another tune that exhibits this well. It's all very punk rock. The production is fine, especially on the remaster, but it's the band's chemistry that really shines through. It's clear that these guys are on the fast road to success from the onset. Some will probably dismiss this collection as an assembly of demos, but that's not really the case. Screaming Life and or FOPP FOP deserve to be recognized as proper albums, similar to how Nirvana's Incesticide should be considered. Just because they're made up from disparate studio recordings doesn't make them any less valuable. This is the Soundgarden I'd have liked to have heard more of. Unfortunately, if I think Cornell continued to sing like this, his voice would have gave out even sooner. By Louder Than Love, they had shed the majority of this raw energy, and it did them good, but I still wish there were a few more albums out there that sounded like this. On the other side of the coin, at the other end of the spectrum, we have Down on the Upside, the final Soundgarden release during their heyday in the 90s, a much maligned collection of songs that don't receive the appreciation they deserve. Thyle has barely a credit to be found outside of the plodding, experimental Never the Machine Forever, but Shepard and Cornell are all over this thing. Interestingly, Cameron only has a few accredited tunes, with his standout being the masterfully written Rhinosaur, a trip with its odd time signatures and strange pacing. If you are a musician, this is the album for you. It's dense with creativity. The guitar riffs are strange. I mean, just try playing Pretty Noose, Zero Chance, or Burden in My Hand. Odd tunings, terrific compositions with wonderfully dark lyrical themes, and consistently experimental percussive sounds coming from the back section. Ben Shepherd's compositions are less silly this time around. They are also some of my favorite Soundgarden pieces. Zero Chance, Dusty, Ty Cobb, a 1-2-3 punch of subdued, interesting pieces by the bassist, the latter containing more fucks than a track from Louder Than Love. Still, this is a fully matured band. No two songs sound alike. Blow Up the Outside World and Burden in My Hand may sound like singles to a casual passerby, but Cornell's lyrical themes in each are some of his darkest. The vocal harmonies in the former channel some morbid Beatles beauty. The singing rarely goes high, as I'm sure he had lost his ability to scream for long periods by this point, but he handles these limitations gracefully. Cornell has always sounded like a Motown diva from Dante's Lowest Circle of Hell to me, and nowhere is that more evident than on every single track here. All of this music is packed with interesting bits. No Attention kicks off like a generic rock song before sailing into experimental territory. Tighter and Tighter, a layered grower with beautiful harmonic guitar melodies. Perfect Tone, Overfloater, and Unkind. Down on the Upside has too many standout tracks to thoroughly dig into. It all culminates in a perfect swan song for one of the best bands in the history of music. If it didn't land with you back in the day, I urge you to give it another listen. Like those final Beatles albums, the inner turmoil makes for some truly compelling music. Some may consider this a cop-out as it's clearly their most successful album, but sometimes popularity is justified. Super Unknown is a masterpiece. It deserves to share the same space as Zeppelin's Fourth and Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, though when it comes to those bands, I tend to prefer some of their other work. When it comes to Soundgarden, I'm much more inclined to agree with the popular consensus. This thing has everything I love about the group in one lengthy production. Speaking of which, there's a great video on this crap form of the producer poring over every song and sharing outtakes. Check it out. There are fans who dislike Cornell's loud vocals on this thing, and yeah, there's some popping, but I think it adds to the sound, particularly on vinyl. Thyle's guitar tone is superb throughout. Every piece perfectly showcases the brilliance of each musician. Cameron's drums are extremely punchy, and Shepard's bass is brilliantly audible. When it comes to this in particular, you can really hear what he brings to the table. Listen to those low ends on The Day I Tried to Live. Try to play along. It's tricky. He's not simply following the guitar. He is the translator for Cameron's percussion. The collaborative efforts of Tyle and Cornell on the title track make for a superb piece of music on par with some of Zeppelin's greatest. From front to back, there's never a dull moment. We've got perky rock numbers followed by slower, moody tunes. For every Spoon Man, there's a Fell on Black Days, but those aren't the standouts to me. Mailman. Jesus Christ, dude. 4th of July, 2 tracks with thick, chugging guitars and emotional vocals piercing through. Shepard's Head Down introduces his love for off-key acoustic melodies, something he would expand on later with those aforementioned Down on the Upside tunes. Half is another experimental piece written by the bassist that I truly love. So weird, so out there. It cuts through the sequencing of the album like a knife. I could go the rest of my life never hearing Black Hole Sun and be happy, but there's no question that it's a masterpiece. Same could be said for any and every single on this thing. I've just heard them far too much. The Day I Tried to Live is the only one I actively go out of my way to listen to these days. It's up there with Gun, Slaves and Bulldozers, those 3 Down on the Upside Shepherd tracks, and Beyond the Wheel. The lyrics, the way it builds, the isolated instruments, it's perfection. Limo Wreck, Fresh Tendrils, now I'm just saying song names. They're all good. The album cover. There was a period in the late 80s where Cornell was being forced to have his shirt off to sell more records on the sleeve against his will, but starting with Bad Motorfinger, the music itself was enough. Super Unknown has everything a Soundgarden fan needs in one perfect package. Seriously, go check out those videos with the producer. It's a wild ride. Rest in peace, Chris Cornell. Rest in peace to one of the greatest singers of one of the best bands of all time. Rest in peace, Soundgarden.